조선노동당 위원장이시며
Welcome, comrades, to the Babox Show. Today we will tell you a story of the GI soldiers who, risking their lives, abandoned futile imperialistic American existence and crossed the border of North Korea, heaven on earth, where they became movie stars. Let's go to a place where we can explain to you this miracle in peace.
Alright, we are safe for now. It is said that here in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, or simply North Korea, someone's always watching. But now it's just you doing that, right? So I tell you a thrilling story of stupid poor young Americans who decided to defect here in search of a better life, or a life at all. North Korea is regarded as the Hermit Kingdom, the most isolated country in the world. Despite being communist, it is a hegemony of one family, Kim's. Country is poor, threatening everyone with its nuclear missiles, atomic backpacks, and has been in state of war with South Korea since 1950. North used to be supplied by Soviets. South to this day is supported by Americans. Between two Koreas there is a border, the 38th parallel, known as the DMZ, Demilitarized Zone, that actually is the most militarized zone, especially as far as landmines are concerned. Both sides guard the border and sometimes North Koreans provoke the US and South Korean forces with skirmishes. And that is it. The US forces patrolling this border between not even countries but worlds. What could have happened in the mind of a young man who grew up in a country like America, with personal freedom, freedom of speech, choice, capitalism, where one can literally do what one wants, that he decides to risk his own life and defect to North Korea? A country so different in any aspect, not to mention the language. The first one of the total 6 US soldiers to defect was Private Larry Allen Upshur, age 19, from Urbana, Illinois. He deserted in May 1962. For 3 months he was the only US citizen in the whole DPRK. His co-traitors speculated that he had been from a troubled family, had problem with drugs, VD, and probably had been to be dishonorably discharged from the army. After 3 months in August 1962, he is joined by a private first class, James Joseph Dresnok, age 21, from Richmond, Virginia, also known as Comrade Joe. After his parents' divorce, he was placed in a foster home, a high school dropout who enlisted a day after his 17th birthday. Served 2 years in West Germany. His wife, whom he'd married in the US, left him. After that, he re-enlisted again and got shipped to South Korea. Very soon after starting his service, was to face court-martial for forging his pass to visit a nearby whorehouse. He deserted in broad daylight, firing shotgun at his own fellow soldiers. A few days after that, he joined Upshur in Pyongyang. December 1963. Corporal Jerry Wayne Parrish, 19, from Morganfield, Kentucky, known as Comrade Kim Yu-il, also crossed the DMZ to North Korea. He confessed to other GIs that his father-in-law had threatened to kill him if he would ever go back home to Kentucky. And the last one from the 1960s wave of defectors was Sergeant Charles Robert Jenkins from Ridge Square, North Carolina, who deserted in January 1965 at age 24. Also a school dropout who at the age of 15 joined the US Army. He had served in South Korea before serving in West Germany and was shipped again to South Korea where he did night patrols at the DMZ. He's the only one of the whole 6 who managed to step foot outside North Korea ever again, nearly 40 years later, claiming that defecting was the worst decision of his life. But before that, his decision for defection was due to his fear of being sent to Vietnam or being killed while on the DMZ patrol. He calculated that North Korea would hand him to Soviets and Soviets would exchange him for their spy, and that way he would circle back to the US and be tried for treason, which is better than death in a Vietnamese jungle. Man, what an ego! He drank 10 beers before crossing the DMZ and took unloaded M14 rifle. That granted him a lifetime of higher rations than those of his US companions. The last 2 traitors defected many years later, but we will talk about these 2 in the last part of this video. Now, let's focus on the first 4 because they were kept together and were the key figures in the North Korean propaganda machine. For nearly a decade, until 1972, they all lived in a small, usually unheated one-room house with no running water in Pyongyang, where they were forced to study and memorize for 8-10 hours a day, 6 days a week, large chunks of works of then leader Kim Il-sung, Juche philosophy, in Korean. The 4 GIs were under constant surveillance of their guards, minders, and beaten for any insubordination as well as mistakes in their education. North Koreans knew that the paradise they offered is a bit worse than imperialistic hell for Americans were used to. So they had to apply divide and conquer method to prevent Americans from becoming friends and conspire. That is why corporal punishment was often exacted by the biggest of the 4 GIs, 6.5 foot tall Dreznok, who is said to have enjoyed it. Jenkins, thanks to the mentioned gun, had biggest food rations that also irritated others, so we know friendships break after a week in a small room when holidays go wrong. Here, about a decade of cabin fever was calculated. Bored Americans often sneaked out to have some fun in, quote from Jenkins' memoir The Reluctant Communist, stealing government property or going on the devil hikes, clinging to tiny ledges on the side of canyons. That ended with cut food rations and beatings. On the outside, 4 Americans were to appear happy, healthy, fit and well-fed. They were faces of many DPRK propaganda leaflets and magazines like Fortune's Favorites. They posed 2 photos in front of shiny tractors and supported anti-American, anti-imperialistic rhetoric. They always appeared as successful young men finally living in utopian North Korea. Moreover, GI Dreznok, shortly after his defection, through the loudspeakers across the DMZ, tried to persuade more American soldiers to defect by advertising North Korea as the land of milk and honey, of better food rations and beautiful women. Leaflets were dropped showing prices for the US Army equipment. That is what made Jenkins take his M14. But North Korean paradise was a little too much for our 4 angels, because already in 1966 they tried to flee to Soviet Union. They escaped their minders and sneaked to Soviet embassy in Pyongyang in search of asylum. But Soviets turned down such a generous offer and handed them back to DPRK. North Koreans didn't punish them but educated them more. There's a Soviet saying, "We will love you for so long until you will love us back." That's what was applied. In 1972, they finally were granted the North Korean citizenship and separate homes. Still under surveillance and indoctrination, every one of those homes had a radio through which the speakers played DPRK propaganda. It couldn't be turned off. They learned to speak Korean. According to Jenkins, Upshur had problems with speaking, but studied sophisticated vocabulary from newspapers. And it is said that Jenkins, on the other hand, had such a thick Southern American accent that it was hard to understand his English, not to mention Korean. Finally, 4 defectors found their purpose, or I should say, one was found for them. Well, in DPRK you can be whomever you want to. You can be a communist, a hardworking communist, a hardworking intellectual communist, a communist soldier, a communist scientist. You see, plenty of freedom. It was obvious that due to their looks, they became North Korean movie stars, playing villains in the North Korean propaganda pictures. Their most famous production, in which 4 of them star, is Nameless Heroes or Unsung Heroes, filmed between 1978 and 1980. A 20-part generic series about spies and evil Americans making profit of the war. Jenkins played Dr. Kelton, an American capitalist, mastermind behind the Korean War, whose goal is to make profit of the army supply. They really did a trick on him, shaving a top of his head to give him a villainous look. Despite that disguise, in 1996, the US Department of Defense obtained a copy of the movie and finally confirmed that Sergeant Jenkins is alive. Dreznok was Arthur, a brutal commander of a prisoner of war camp. He even dubbed himself and gained wide recognition. Many North Koreans addressed him as Arthur. Upshur was Carl, the subordinate of the 2 evil Americans. Upshur's spectacular wooden acting seems like a sabotage to this picture. Parrish played Lewis, a Northern Irish officer who despises the occupation of his country by the British and who deserts royal forces to join the North Korean cause and becomes a communist. Thanks to this, Parrish was treated by North Koreans like a true communist hero. Jenkins' final propaganda picture is from 2000 titled Pueblo. It is about capturing in 1968 the USS Pueblo by DPRK forces. Dreznok's offspring also stars there. Apart from acting, the defectors taught English language at the Pyongyang University of Foreign Studies. You remember that they were high school dropouts, right? Jenkins got fired because his English could possibly be only understood in deep Appalachians. They also translated American movies for film buff Kim Jong-il, but they didn't get to watch them though. They translated audio tapes where dialogue fragments were purposely mixed, so they would have difficulty to recognize the plot of the movie. The text was later turned into the movie's subtitles by someone else. You know, that's North Korean freedom of art for you. As everything in North Korea, even love is ordered. Men have needs, so 4 former soldiers were given North Korean women to cook, watch, and make love with. Those were women that DPRK thought to be infertile, divorcees, but when Upshur's female companion got pregnant, she disappeared. Although the 4 Americans made their own decision to defect, the women they were forced to marry were kidnapped from other countries. That is love, DPRK style. James Dreznok was given a Romanian artist, Doina Bumbea, kidnapped in 1978 when she met a DPRK agent in Rome who promised her an exhibition in Hong Kong. They did a stop in Pyongyang on the route there, and she never left Korea. She and Dreznok had 2 sons, Ted and James Gabriel, who are avid party members and speak English with a strong Korean accent. Ted is actually Hong Sun Chol. His brother goes by the name Hong Chol. They both play villainous Americans in movies. Their mother reportedly died of lung cancer in North Korea in 1997. Her family is not allowed to have any contact with her sons despite their attempts to. What's more, North Korea denies that she ever was there. Dreznok remarried in 2001 to a daughter of Togolese diplomat and a North Korean woman, and had a third son, Tony, the same year. Larry Upshur was given Anoka Panjoy, a young Thai woman abducted by North Korean agents from Macau in 1978. She had been working as a massage therapist in a hotel there when she vanished. Upshur died at 40 of a heart attack in North Korea in 1983. They had no children. Jerry Parish married a Lebanese Siham Shraitech. According to Jenkins, despite being kidnapped with 3 other women from Beirut, she was able to return there thanks to well-connected parents of one of those women. But, being already pregnant with Parish, her family sent her back to North Korea to deliver the baby. She never left again. She appeared in documentary Crossing the Line and denied that she'd been ever kidnapped or forced to go to North Korea. Parish died in 1998, leaving Siham and their 3 sons who remain in DPRK. Love conquers all, even the North Korean regime, and this is no joke. In 1980, 40-year-old Jenkins was blessed with a 21-year-old Japanese-trained nurse, Hitomi Soga. She and her mother were kidnapped from Sado Island in Japan the same year as the mentioned other female abductees, 1978. They were to train North Korean spies in language and customs of Japanese. Hitomi never saw her mother after the abduction again. 38 days after meeting, Soga and Jenkins were married. Despite being forced to marry, they actually fell in love, had 2 daughters, and her being Japanese bought Jenkins freedom to leave North Korea he could never even dream of. Finally, they all ended up in Japan, leaving Dreznok a sole American in the whole DPRK. But before that, Dreznok and Jenkins, who were never friends, were forced to come close after all other fellow deserters died. They lived next door to each other. In 1990s, famine struck DPRK, but they received full food rations, mainly poor quality rice full of bugs, despite many of North Koreans starved to death. The power shortages and failure of central heating made walls of their apartments covered with frost. But that was the paradise they chose, right? In 2002, luck smiled to Jenkins. Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi visited DPRK, and Kim Jong-il, counting on improving relations between 2 countries and gaining some financial help, admitted that DPRK had kidnapped 13 Japanese citizens between 1970s and 80s, of whom 8 died, but remaining 5 are allowed to visit their homeland. One of those was Jenkins' wife Hitomi Soga. The 5 Japanese were to return after a few days, but obviously none of them ever did. Worth noting, to this day, North Korea denies the abduction of any foreign citizens other than Japanese. Japanese government successfully negotiated with DPRK that families of those 5 that remain in DPRK should join them in Japan. That is how Jenkins and his daughters escaped the North Korean dreamland. But Jenkins was a US deserter and had to face court-martial with the possibility of life sentence, since Japan is the American ally. It took some paperwork, diplomatic dealings, and finally Jenkins in 2004 joined his wife in Jakarta, Indonesia, because this country had no extradition treaty with the US. North Korea thought Jenkins and his daughters would return after spending several days with Soga in Indonesia, but facing court-martial is a better option than life in DPRK, so Jenkins' family went to Japan. There, on November 3, 2004, after several weeks in hospital, Jenkins faced court-martial, where he pleaded guilty of desertion and aiding the enemy by teaching English, but denied making disloyal statements. Those latter charges were dropped. Jenkins was sentenced to 30 days in a US military jail in Japan, was dishonorably discharged, stripped of back pay and benefits, and degraded to private. He was released 6 days early for good behavior on November the 27th, 2004. The sentence was lenient, allegedly because nearly 40 years in DPRK is a horror no human should suffer. But every thinking person knows that he had a lot to share, and that was a bargaining chip for his release. Leading his wonderful life in DPRK, he lost a part of his tattoo saying US Army, which was cut out without anesthesia, since that was reserved only for heroes, one testicle and appendix. He never used computer, not to mention the internet. He and his family settled in Japan on mentioned Sado Island, where his wife had come from. He was there a tourist mascot serving cookies in a local history museum in Mano Park. In 2005, he even managed to visit his living then 91-year-old mother in North Carolina. He stated, "I'd like to go back to the US, but my wife don't want to go, and I have no means to support her there." Yes, being a traitor is not something you'd write in your job application. In 2017, a DPRK film star who became a famous tourist attraction died a free man. According to North Korean official reports, Apshur and Parish died of natural causes while living there. Dresnok died of a stroke in DPRK in 2016. His death was confirmed by his sons almost a year after. He was featured in documentaries like British Crossing the Line or CBS's 60 Minutes, where he claimed that he would never leave North Korea even if, quote, "you put $1 billion of gold on the table." Now, let's go back to the last American defectors who escaped to North Korea several years later. They were Roy Chung, who deserted in June 1979, age 22, South Korean immigrant, and Joseph T. White, 20, from St. Louis, Missouri, who deserted in August 1982. These cases are also interesting. For example, Roy Chung did not cross the DMZ. He disappeared in Europe while guarding Czechoslovakian and East German border. 2 months after his disappearance, Radio Pyongyang announced his desertion, stating that he could no longer endure the disgraceful life of national insult and maltreatment he had to lead in the US imperialist aggressor army. Joseph White, before crossing the DMZ, stole a duffel bag of papers including layout of the landmines guarding South Korea. The North Korean media stated that he denounced USA due to corruptness, criminality, immorality, weakness, and hedonism. In February 1983, White's parents received a letter from their son stating that he was happy in North Korea and working as an English teacher. In November 1985, his parents received a letter written by an alleged North Korean friend of White, stating that their son had died by drowning in August 1985 and his body was not recovered. As you see, the stories of those 6 American soldiers are an embodiment of beware what you wish for, because it can sometimes come true. Only one got saved by a love of an innocent girl. Damn it. For Jenkins, it really must have been like some fairy tale with happy ending. Today, there are no American defectors left in North Korea, and if you think of visiting this country and your passport says the USA, since September the 1st, 2017, it is illegal for you to do it due to a travel ban put by the US government. The most probable reason why it is so is the case of Otto Warmbier, a 21-year-old American student who on New Year of 2016 dared to take a propaganda poster from a hotel wall as a souvenir from his trip. He was sentenced by North Korea to 15 years of imprisonment and hard labor, but died a year later for unknown reasons. Allegedly, he fell into a coma after contracting botulism and taking a sleeping pill. Yeah, right. DPRK is no joke, and one decision may change your life forever. Like, for example, now. You can subscribe to us, and your life will never be the same. Do the right thing here. Until the next time, comrades.